In her campaign for justice in her daughter Ruby's murder, Maricela Escobedo had become a symbol for all mothers who lost daughters to senseless violence in Juarez, where 300 women were killed just in 2010. Maricela had found Sergio Barraza, the man convicted of killing Ruby, yet he was still a free man, reputedly a member of the ruthless Zeta cartel, virtually untouchable and possibly more dangerous than before.
Your mother started to receive threats.
Yeah, this started after we discovered that he was with this cartel.
And what kind of threats was your mother receiving?
To leave everything the way it was.
But Maricela wasn't about to do that. She traveled to Mexico City to gain an audience with President Felipe Calderon. She spoke with the media, but not with the president. In a way, it was surprising that Calderon wouldn't meet Maricela. After all, she was a brave Mexican who had seized the national spotlight by standing up against criminality. And he was a president who had staked his claim to history on his war against organized crime. In fact, the government had been proud of its efforts and victories in that war. They'd managed to capture or kill some 20 top cartel leaders. And the Mexican government says it's trying to deal with the corruption problem, beginning with who gets recruited into the police.
How many people work in this operation here?
250 people.
Francisco Niembro, Undersecretary of the Federal Police, gave us a tour of their Mexico City Intelligence Center.
I noticed that it looks more like a university campus.
Yes. We need to start with young people in order to conform the new abilities and profiles for intelligence.
Some say going after the cartel leaders isn't the real solution. In fact, it can make things worse. Political scientist Eduardo Guerrero spent 2 years poring over the statistics. He found that immediately after the government takes down a cartel leader, the violence goes way up. He says that's because there's a battle for succession, and the cartel's rivals attack their weakened enemy.
We went along with more than 100 agents as they went after the leader of La Familia. What's wrong with that picture?
When you arrest these top leaders, you create a wave of violence that sometimes is very, very costly, and many people die.
So what do you want? You want to reduce violence, or you want to reduce drug trafficking?
Former Foreign Minister Jorge Castañeda had been a major backer of President Calderon. But now he thinks the president's war on the cartels is a failure and says the U.S. shares some of the responsibility.
As long as you have the market that you have in the United States for drugs of all sorts, and in particular for cocaine coming from Colombia through Mexico, it's impossible to shut it down.
And since he thinks it's unrealistic to stop drug use in the U.S., he proposes a possibly radical solution for both countries.
We should legalize some drugs, start doing it now. Second, we have to fight the violence and crime that affects society. That is, kidnapping, extortion, holdups, robbery.
In other words, go after violent criminals like Sergio, a killer who was still free and seemingly hidden by the dark shadow of a cartel. The police didn't appear interested in arresting him, but Maricela still was. She traveled to the state capital, Chihuahua, this time without Juan.
Did you worry about her safety?
Yeah, of course. All the time. Every trip, every time that she was on the road, I had this thought,
that maybe she wasn't going to come home.
Yeah.
At the state capitol this past December, Maricela vowed to stage a vigil until Sergio was locked up. She went public about the threats, which she believed were coming from her daughter's murderer.
If this man is going to come kill me, let him come and kill me right here to shame the government.
A few nights later, at 7:30 p.m., a week before Christmas, a surveillance camera captures the scene at the plaza beside the governor's office. Maricela is seated next to her brother, continuing her vigil. This is an official government area, yet no police officers appear to be present. Watch carefully. A white car pulls up next to Maricella's vehicle, where her granddaughter is sleeping. A man gets out. He approaches Maricela and tries to shoot her. But his gun jams. Her brother throws a chair at him. She runs away. He chases Maricela across the street. This time, the gun works. She falls on the sidewalk, shot in the head. 2 years after her daughter Ruby had disappeared, Maricela Escobedo, a woman who somehow thought law and order could bring her justice, was murdered in front of the state capitol. The assassination made headlines throughout Mexico. President Calderon used his Twitter account to comment that it was, quote, lamentable that the judges had freed Ruby's confessed killer, and that this impunity caused the assassination of Maricela Escobedo. But despite this message, and despite our repeated requests, no Mexican government official on any level could find time to sit down for an interview to talk with us about the killing of Maricela Escobedo.
This shows how the government doesn't really care about justice.
Reporter Sandra Rodriguez says she's outraged that in the face of all the threats Maricela Escobedo was receiving, the police failed to protect her.
Who is worse, the police or the cartels?
In Mexico, there is no difference.
No difference.
There is no difference.
They're intertwined through corruption. Money.
If the cartels are so strong as they are, it's because they work with the protection of the state all these years. That's for sure.
Every time that I see it, I cry because I feel so frustrated that, first of all, I was not there to help her. And nobody else, the police, the ones that should be, doing their job, they were not there.
The day after Maricela Escobedo was shot, her boyfriend's carpentry shop was burned to the ground. And later, his brother would also be murdered, along with a witness who testified at Sergio Barraza's trial. The Escobedo family is living in fear of retribution. Ruby's murderer, Sergio Barraza, is still at large. Police have also not apprehended anyone in the killing of Maricela. Juan Escobedo is now in the United States, seeking asylum with the help of lawyer Carlos Spector, though he vows to keep fighting the crime and impunity that has seized his homeland.
Don't you fear they'll come after you next?
I do, but I can't stop. If she didn't stop, I'm not going to stop.